Yosemite National Park is a paradise on earth for nature lovers and adventure seekers. This vast expanse of wilderness located in California's Sierra Nevada mountains attracts millions of visitors every year who come here to witness its awe-inspiring beauty. And biking is one of the best ways to see more of those famous sights, plus get some fresh air and enjoy a fun activity outdoors. Yosemite National Park is home to some of the most iconic natural landmarks, including the Half Dome, Yosemite Falls, and El Capitan. The park covers an area of over 1,200 square miles and offers a range of activities for visitors of all ages and abilities. There are over 3 million people who visit Yosemite each and every year. In Yosemite Valley, bike rentals are available during the warmer months of the year. There are small bikes and trailers for children and tandem and hand crank bikes for the visually or physically impaired. With more than 12 miles of paved, mostly flat trails, riding a bike is a fun and convenient way to see Yosemite Valley. The 12-mile loop usually takes an average of 2 hours to complete. But when you rent a bike from a concession bike rental business in Yosemite, both the park and the bike rental company have legal responsibilities to rent you safe bikes and provide a safe riding experience throughout the park. Bicycles are composed of many different components manufactured by a variety of companies around the world. Regardless of the make and model, parts can and do break or malfunction, and as a result cause riders to have bicycle accidents, putting you as a cyclist at risk. Bicycles, like so many other products, have a long history of defective engineering and defective manufacturing as documented by the U.S. Consumer Protection Safety Commission. In 2009, the CPSC announced more than a dozen recalls of bicycles, bicycle accessories, and bicycle parts due to serious hazards and injury potential. Like with motor vehicles, brakes on bicycles can fail. One moment a cyclist is cruising along a highway, the next moment warning signs are not clearly visible, and even though the cyclist is doing the right thing, when the brakes fail, there is no way to prevent a tragic accident. And that is exactly what happened to Mary Hall when she rented a bike from the Curry Company, a Yosemite Park concessionaire, to ride down the hill from Lower Yosemite Falls. Unfortunately, the brakes didn't work and she slammed head-on into a tree, breaking her neck, paralyzing her, and rendering her a quadriplegic from the neck down. Earlier that same morning, the concession rented the very same bicycle to another woman who brought it back, telling them the brakes didn't work, and she crashed too. But without fixing the bike, they still rented it out to Mary and failed to notify her of the defective brakes. In this insider exclusive Justice in America Network TV special, our investigating team is on location in San Francisco with Mary Alexander, Mary Hall's lawyer, who successfully tried this case and won an unprecedented $13.3 million verdict, and will share with us how she won this challenging case. Mary has earned a reputation as an unyielding trial lawyer who repeatedly represents individuals and families and repeatedly wins. She has earned the highest respect from citizens and lawyers alike as one of the best trial lawyers in the San Francisco, Oakland Bay Area and throughout California. She's built a substantial reputation by consistently winning cases other law firms have turned down because she believes to her core that someone who has been harmed is someone who should be helped. And because of that belief in her amazing courtroom skills and headline-grabbing success rate, she continues to provide her clients with the results they need and the results they deserve. This is the Insider Exclusive, live from San Francisco.
It is my great privilege to introduce Mary Alexander to the show. Welcome to the show, Mary.
Thank you. Great to be here.
It's an honor for me to be here because, you know, your record of victories, verdicts, are quite amazing. You're a dedicated lawyer. I remember reading that you were an environmentalist first, and you decided you'd be more effective in the law, so you pursued that. So you've actually had two careers. In fact, you've had, besides the case that we're going to be talking about, Mary Hall's case, you've had some cases that have dealt, similar cases like that. One for a San Mateo victim. You want to tell us a little bit about that?
In that case, a driver ran a red light and T-boned her, and she was forced over into the right side of the car, and looks like the airbag exploded, and on that side of the car broke her neck, and she was paralyzed from the neck down, and it was $45 million verdict for her.
It's a big verdict. You don't hear of those kind of verdicts usually. And I know of another case that you have been involved with, the chemical benzene. Two brothers, right? You want to talk about that a little bit?
There were two brothers who worked both for 30 years in a tire factory, and they would use a solvent with benzene in it to clean off the tires, clean off the rubber, and both developed blood diseases, leukemia and non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and died from it. And so we pursued the chemical companies on behalf of the widows and their children for their wrongful death.
Well, congratulations on that too. Today we are really here to talk about the Mary Hall case, which do you want to tell our audience a little bit about who Mary Hall was?
Picture a woman, Mary Hall, coming into the Yosemite Park. She rented a bicycle from a Curry company, rode downhill from lower Yosemite Falls, and the brakes on the bicycle didn't work, and she crashed headfirst into a tree, breaking her neck, and on a breathing machine for life.
And later on, first of all, the brakes that were on this bike were coaster brakes, right? The kinds you use with your feet.
Coaster brakes like we all had on our bikes when we were first learning to ride, where you push backwards. And those kind of brakes do not have enough braking power on hills like you have in Yosemite Valley. And so that's one of the reasons why we were claiming that the Curry company was negligent. They never should have rented those kind of bikes. They should have had mountain bikes with 10 speeds on it and really good brakes.
Yeah, hand brakes, right? And they had them this was back in the 80s, they had them then. I had a 10-speed back in the 60s, you know, and they had hand brakes. You needed them.
That's right. And they said, oh, we couldn't possibly rent hand brakes to the public. And while that case was pending, I went on vacation in Maui, and there was a guy called Haleakala Bob who would rent bicycles at the top of Haleakala volcano to the public, and they could ride down the mountain. And guess what? His brochure had people riding with hand brakes. The judge let me put that brochure into evidence in the case.
And that swayed the jury, obviously, right? Better equipment. This bike that Mary Hall rented had been rented earlier in the day by another girl, correct?
There was another girl who had rented it earlier in the morning, brought this bicycle back to the little shop and said, I crashed, the brakes didn't work. And they took it, but they put it back into circulation and rented it to the next person, which was Mary Hall.
Yeah, not fixing it, not warning her, nothing.
We found out that it was actually had been repaired previously with used brakes, worn brakes. We proved that in court. There are 4 pieces of the brake that would close together to cause a braking power, and we showed in court that they had been previously used. They had teenagers fixing these bicycle brakes, and they would reach into a box for old brakes and put them together. And that's why these brakes did not have enough power that they should have for coaster brakes.
Now, the defendants in this case were Yosemite Park and the Curry Company.
We just sued the Curry Company, the concessionaire that had the contract for it, because they were the ones who were there on the ground and that were renting out these the incorrect kind of bicycle without the handbrakes and didn't warn.
Right. I read that the Curry Company was an old established company.
And they had a 60-year contract with the government. Little incentive to do a good job or get better. And so they were held accountable there.
Well, congratulations on that. I understand that Mary was hospitalized for 2 years, correct?
Mary, from the time of the accident, she was helicoptered into San Jose to the hospital there. And for 2 years, it actually cost the government less to keep her in the hospital than to take care of her outside. It was so satisfying to win this case and allow her to leave the hospital, to live in her own home, to have helpers, to have someone who could immediately give her a drink of water if she needed it, rather than having to wait in the ward setting that she was in the hospital.
What was her response when the verdict came in?
Mary was so happy, so vindicated, because they had said it was her fault. And then she was so excited that she was going to get out of the hospital and be able to live on her own. It meant everything to her.
What kind of message does this send to all rental companies when they rent equipment? Like today, for example, when bicycle companies rent their bikes, are they required to give the people helmets, or what are they required to do?
The message to bicycle companies that are renting out bicycles is to, first of all, have the proper good equipment, the good bicycles with the right kind of brakes and gears, and also to hand out, with the rental, helmets, and also to warn people. Give them maps, tell them where they should ride and where they shouldn't ride, and to avoid dangers. It's one of the things that the jury said in this case, was that they should have warned. One juror said to me afterwards when we were talking, she said, "Put up a sign in the rental store, don't ride down the hill at Lower Yosemite Falls," or to hand out a map that simply said, "Don't ride here, don't ride there." No warnings were given to help protect the public.
Do you know if those warnings are there today?
I see that they are still renting coaster brake bikes, which really are fine if you're on the valley floor, but not on the hills. But I have seen warning signs on the hill. That's what they should have had too, is don't ride down this hill. The sign right at the top of the hill.
What were some of the challenges you had in this case?
One of the challenges we had was that the defense made a videotape reenacting what it looked like to Mary riding down that hill. They put a computerized camera and moved this cart with a camera on it down the hill, and then sped it up to make it just like her. We tried to keep it out of evidence that it wasn't similar enough, but the judge let it in. And the point that they were trying to make is that Mary was stupid to ride down that hill, and that was all her fault. The problem is, at the top of the hill, you couldn't tell how steep it was. And she hadn't come up the hill. She'd come up a back way. There's a separate back way to get there from the rental company. And so we were very worried about that videotape, that the jury would think that she was crazy to ride down the hill. Turned out, the jury said later, all we could think of was that poor woman riding down that hill without good brakes.
Mm-hmm. Well, that was smart of you to do that, right? When, this particular case brings to mind that there's a lot of, we're in the summertime now, a lot of people rent things. When you rent things today, Oftentimes, on the back of your receipt is a big disclaimer. We're not responsible for everything. You got to cover everything. How effective are those in a courtroom when you're injured?
Well, those disclaimers and when you sign that kind of release, they can be upheld by the court. But sometimes there are situations where there's actually what we call active negligence on the part of the company who's renting. For example, here, active negligence was putting this bike that they knew had just had a crash, putting it back into service. But if it's just riding a bike and you hit a bump and you hurt yourself, those are the kinds of things that are more inherent. But one does have to be careful. In Mary's case, she was with her boyfriend. He signed the release, but she didn't. Because if she didn't sign it, she didn't have the contract.
She didn't read it.
And they couldn't hold her to something that somebody else had signed.
Mm-hmm. Interesting, because I'm sure the other side brought that up, didn't they?
They did.
Kind of foolish, wasn't it?
Well, it didn't make it into court, that issue.
In this case and other cases where there's accidents, what is the first thing people should do when they're in an accident, if they can? What should they do?
I think when someone's in any kind of an accident with his car or a bicycle or a pedestrian, that the first thing that should be done is to take photographs of whatever it was that caused the incident and also the surroundings so that you can document it, because things change. Sometimes the defendants come in and change things immediately. So that's the number one thing. And then, of course, to call for help, and call for first responders, call for the police.
These kind of cases bring up the concept of what type of compensation are you entitled to when you are injured in any accident? What are the types of compensation? Like medical expenses, lost wages, right?
The kinds of compensation that people are entitled to when they have these kinds of injuries are, first of all, what we call economic, which is medical bills, the kind of economic loss, lost wages if they're not able to work, and those kinds of things that you can blackboard, that you can put up on a chart. And then the other kind is what we call non-economic, compensatory, to compensate people for how it's affected their life, which is really what it's about, is how their lives have changed, and how the injury has affected them, and the things that they're not able to do that they used to be able to do. If they're not able to work, it means a lot to people, the kinds of career and what they like to do for a living, and also the activities just of daily living, being able to spend time and do things with the family that they used to do. Mary Hall couldn't even walk across a room, couldn't pick up a glass of water, couldn't hold a child ever again for the rest of her life, and that deserved compensation. And I did this case with Dan Wilcoxon, and that was such a gratifying thing for us to be able to help Mary and change her life.
How do you, because you've gotten these big verdicts, how do you persuade jurors when you're talking to them, right? How do you persuade them to understand and put them in the shoes of, like, Mary Hall? What do you say?
To try to get a jury to understand what it's like to live with a serious injury like this is hard. But one way we did it was what we call a day in the life. We did a videotape of Mary from the very moment she's awake in bed in the morning, what it took to use a sling to put her into the wheelchair, to then take her into the bathroom, someone to brush her teeth, someone to brush her hair. And it is very time consuming just to get her up in the morning, and then to feed her breakfast, go through the day, all the way through evening when that whole process of getting her back into bed starts again. So the jury begins to see the kind of care that it takes for people. And people with less injury too to show a day in the life of what it's like for them to do the very simple things in life sometimes.
Just so our audience knows that the defense always tries to keep these out of the courtroom, correct?
The defense tries to keep the day in the life out, or at least portions of it, that it's too inflammatory for the jury. And of course, our response is, this is the way it is. This is just the truth. And they will do things like with Mary Hall, one of their doctors said, oh, she doesn't need her breathing machine checked once a month. That's too often, too expensive. Mm-hmm. Well, she was dependent on that machine for her very life and breathing, and we thought she was entitled to once a month.
Right, and that comes down to, in the category, life care expenses, right? You have an expert, they present an expert. What they want is someone on Medicare. You know, what you want is a comfortable way of living so someone can live in a satisfactory way, correct? And there's always a big difference in the value of this over a period of time. How long was it projected that Mary would live?
It was projected that Mary would live at least 10 years, if not longer. And one of the important things is not only just to give her a comfortable life, but she was entitled to the best medical care that is available so that she could live as long as possible, and that to put her in the best position to live a good quality life.
You know, how long did Mary live, by the way?
It was about 12 years.
You have a lot of people that contact you because of your big verdicts. So you have to be very careful and selective in who you choose as a client. How do you do that?
When I am thinking about taking a case, I, of course, first of all, look at what the facts are, what the circumstances are, and what the injuries are. But I also like to get to know the client and what it is that they really want and need, and that enters into my decision about taking a case. It's so satisfying. It's such satisfactory work to help somebody and to make their lives better.
And you do that time and time again.
I tell my staff every year at our holiday party how wonderful it is that we can make a living and help and make a difference in people's lives. It is something that we do every day, and it really is a wonderful way to work together.
I think you had to be born with that, right?
For the feeling of wanting to help people, I think that that's true, that it is something that is innate, and I think in our law firm that we really appreciate helping people. We want to do it. And, you know, every day it's not as exciting as being in the courtroom. There's drudgery, there's work that has to be done, but it's the end result of being able to help people that are in need.
Well, congratulations on the win. Congratulations on making Mary Hall's life a lot better, and thank you for being on the show.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for joining us. You can get more information about our guest and the issues at insiderexclusive.com.